You're listening to the Fan2Fan podcast, episode 10. Hey everyone, you're listening to the Fan2Fan podcast, and this is your host, Bernie Gonzalez. The first time I can remember watching a movie in a theater was Pinocchio back in 1984. I was 6 at the time, and my memory spotty at best, but I distinctly recall Pinocchio on stage, singing and dancing to I've Got No Strings. I remember the whole whale scene and being terrified as a kid when Monstro the whale starts swimming through the ocean. I remember being excited when Pinocchio started a smoky bonfire inside the whale's mouth, causing it to sneeze, and that anxious feeling when Pinocchio and Geppetto were rowing as hard as they could to pull their raft out of the whale's mouth. I remember sitting in the theater next to my mom. I remember how dark it was and how focused I was on the screen. And that was over 30 years ago. But that moment, watching what I always feel was probably my first time in a movie theater, that moment sticks with me. So I'll always remember Pinocchio as a movie, but for me, that moment was more about the movie theater. So how many movies have I seen in a movie theater since Pinocchio? Easily into hundreds. But then I started to think about how many movie theaters I've been to. Small, big, mom and pop, multiplex, rundown movie palaces, rehabbed movie palaces, revival houses, drive-in theaters, opening nights, weekdays, matinees, midnight showings. So over 30 years of being a moviegoer, and that movie-going experience has evolved for me, and I'm sure it has for you, so I wanted to talk about it. So in this episode, joined by my friend, film fanatic, and fellow podcaster Josh Adams. He's one of the hosts of the I Hate Critics podcast, and as you'll hear, he's a movie-going romantic. So let's talk about going to the movies. By the way, I just hit record. So,
okay.
But anyway, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. It's been a busy time of year, and I've just been trying to cram every little thing that I've been trying to watch and get to, TV shows, et cetera, and no sleep. In fact, I'm getting less sleep now, so go figure.
So, but you're not a big TV watcher, are you?
Well, what I try and do is catch up on all of this episodic stuff. I mean, I'm sure that to an extent that as well, with Netflix and Amazon Prime and Hulu and our ability to binge watch and whatnot, it's not something I really did until the show Dexter came along, and then I started binge watching that one season at a time. Game of Thrones came along, Walking Dead, but stuff like that. It gets me intrigued because those are more cinematic television shows, and I'm interested in something that looks like it's cinematic. A lot of the time, TV shows don't do that. It just doesn't have the same look or feel to it. You get the sense the production values aren't there as well. But lately, gosh, within the past 5 to 7 years, maybe even a little bit before that, you've gotten really high quality production values with a lot of television shows, and that intrigues me. We've got traditionally film actors going back to television, and because of that, it's piqued my interest to a much higher degree. Lately, I've been trying to get back to things like Sherlock or Luther, and I'm really trying to get back to Game of Thrones as well, but things like Daredevil, because they tie into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Jessica Jones, all of those things intrigue me to no end. So TV is just another thing for me to sink my teeth into.
So I was going to say, last time we spoke, you'd mentioned you watched Daredevil in a little bit over 24 hours, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Is that how you traditionally watch Sherlock, for example? I mean, you get 3 episodes in a season. Do you try to watch them all in one evening in the scope of 2 evenings, or do you space them out a bit?
I would prefer one evening because it's like reading a book, right? You don't want to put it down if it's that good. The same thing for an episodic television show for me. I don't want to put it down. But unfortunately, at this advanced age, I say this in air quotes, of course, I can't quite stay up all the time. I'm trying really hard to push through some of it, but I can't quite do it. I would really like to, though.
Isn't that weird how that happens? Remember air quotes, good old days when we would stay up till 3, 4 in the morning in the residence halls.
Yes, I don't know how that happens. All of the conversations, all of those things, they're gone now. But I suppose it provided the foundation for what we're doing today.
By virtue of the fact that you are a film fan, by virtue of the fact that you are a host for the I Hate Critics podcast, it is probably safe to say you find yourself in the theater more often than the average moviegoer.
Indeed, I would say once a week, the occasional weekends where there's 2 major releases that I'm interested in. Sometimes the occasional third one pops up if I'm able to get in without breaking the bank. So most definitely, I'm spending more than the average film goer would just to go to the theater each week.
Okay, this is good because this will set up the spectrum of where you are versus where I am. Last movie I saw in the theater was Force Awakens.
Okay.
Prior to that, last movie I saw was Gone Girl.
Okay.
So there's
you got a year
massive
gap there.
Yes, a massive valley in between. And that's not to say that I do not watch movies. I probably watch a movie every night, if not every other night, which, like yourself, I'll throw in the occasional Sherlock, Luther, House of Cards, or what have you. But it's not for a lack of watching movies. It's just for a lack of not necessarily wanting to go to the theater.
Sure.
Between Netflix, the other streaming services, low cost to get a surround system. I mean, you remember first days in college, I worked at Best Buy, and I at least had the ability to get a fairly large surround system, at least just by virtue of my discount at Best Buy. But it was not something that everyone had. But I'm sure now if we go to a college dorm room, it's probably THX certified at this point.
I don't doubt it. And at that point, that was the holy grail. If you could have something THX certified, but I was pretty happy with what you had. I consider that to be the magnum opus of college dorm room sound. So I would have taken that any day. And I attempted to meet that. To a certain degree. I'd never seen a tower speaker before I came into your dorm room, believe it or not. And so I did try to do the same, but only being able to hear out of one ear, which is my downfall, I wouldn't have known any different anyway. So yours was plenty loud.
Since you're at the movies so often, kind of paint me a picture here, what you're seeing in very broad strokes over the last, few years, over the last decade. What has it been like? What's changed for you as far as going to the movies?
That's an interesting question. For me now, it's feast or famine. If there is the next big thing, then everyone's there. And by everyone, I mean you should expect to see lines. You should expect to wait. You should expect a fulfilling experience with you're joining a bunch of people, hundreds of people in a theater at one time, experiencing something pop culture, whether it's good or bad or whatever. Those are pinnacle moments. And if it's good and it has a following, it's going to last for a couple of weeks. But if you can throw this back to about 25 years ago, 1993's Jurassic Park, I think, is a good benchmark for when this last took place. I remember Jurassic Park being in theaters and just breaking all sorts of records, and everyone was going a second or a third time. And this lasted until holiday season. It was in theaters for months and months with the same staying power, not necessarily winning every weekend per se, but it was there. Number one, there were less movies in the theater, so it had the ability to stay longer. Number two, it was a cultural phenomenon, so of course it was going to stay longer. But when I say feast or famine, I do mean that it's going to last for a short period of time, and it's going to be ravenous. And then after that, it's going to trail off. And the drops are precipitous. Batman and Superman, it had, between a 50 and 70% drop off in its second week. And by its third week, I think it was defeated by a Melissa McCarthy film. So I think that tells you something. Batman and Superman, released in 1993, is going to last for maybe a month or two in the number one spot because there just wasn't a competitor. everyone has got the next big thing now. And they load us up with these once, maybe twice, maybe 3 times a month, sometimes 2 times a weekend, where we get these large cultural events in the theater. Now, that being said, the experience now is also, it's just different. The megaplexes have taken over. There's very few mom and pop theaters left where the entire community can gather in one particular theater for 4 to 5 times a day to see a particular film. That it almost makes me feel very nostalgic or very ancient just saying that, because you can get your entertainment in so many different places now. It doesn't seem to be that collaborative experience anymore. Do you understand what I mean by that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you think about the AMC's, Cinemark. I mean, these are the Carmichael. These are the big franchises. Gone are the days of, like you said, the mom and pop theaters. If anything, those theaters, if to thrive, they've had to become niche or genre, basically like houses. So you have the Alamo Draft House in Austin. Here in Chicago, we have the Music Box, where they can have these very esoteric showings of things like The Room, with the director doing a Q&A, or just this past week, they had a midnight showing of The Last Dragon. I mean, it's great. It's terrific, but I saw Mystery Science Theater, the movie, at a midnight showing at the Music Box, and that barely had a theatrical release. So to see it there, I mean, that's the only way some of these theaters survive, is by having these kind of niche events where they can bring people in, which is not to say that the franchises don't do that. They have operas, plays, AMC's, they show the Riff Track movies, speaking of Mystery Science Theater 3000, and that will probably bring in a few people. I've been to one. The theater probably had at best 20, maybe 25 people in there, but that's probably 20 to 25 people that would not have been there to begin with in the theater, and would probably not have gone to see The Boss or The Jungle Book. For sure.
You have to at least mention the price of things now as well. I'm not an economics major, and never would be for that matter. But I think that because you have such a democratization of your entertainment options now, you can be at home and spend next to nothing and order something on demand. Or if you dare go to a local video store, I think maybe Family Video and a few smaller ones still exist, spend that small amount of money as opposed to going to the theater, because a theater ticket is on average $10 now. And that's, going to an evening show. And then when you do that, if you've got a family of 4, let's just say typical family of 4, you're already spending $40 there. And if anybody wants any snacks, that's going to maybe even double. It's such an expensive thing now. I know it was expensive when I was a child, but it was a different kind of expensive. It wasn't a break your back expensive like it is now. I understand why they are. They've got to pay for these movies. They've got to pay for the budgets of these, the people that are in them, et cetera, et cetera. It's a big, big, big business, and it always has been, but it seems so much more exponential now that you've forced people to become niche in a way. So that also fragments our experience a little bit. To me, it has become less of an event that everyone can take place in. It's become less of an event that everyone can join in on. It is more fractured for a lot of different reasons, and I think the main reason is because of the cost involved. I don't know how you feel about that, because I feel old just saying that, like I'm crotchety, but I think that does matter.
No, I agree. So I actually looked up some numbers just because I had the same idea. I'm like, have ticket prices really gone up? Because I feel they were always high, but it's all comparative. But in 1996, average theater ticket price was $4.42.
Yes.
So then let's jump to 2009, $7.50. 2013, $8.13, and just last year, 2015, $8.43. And like you said, that's for your average ticket price. We're not including IMAX, 3D, any of the other more experiential or immersive movie-going experiences that are out there that will easily cost you, like you mentioned, $10 for your ticket.
Yes, and that's the goal, of course. There's 3D everything, special IMAX everything, early screenings, special events. I went to a screening of Batman Superman on a Tuesday, and I wasn't supposed to be able to go to that, right? But it was a special event to the public, and for $25 you could see the film, you could get snacks, and they were supposed to provide you dinner. Number one, they didn't provide us dinner at all. Number two, the snacks were the child-sized drink and popcorn, and that's supposed to sate you for the experience of seeing it a day earlier than other people. These things that they're trying to do to make the theater experience more special or whatever, it's just, to me, it's ham-handed. It doesn't really help anybody out. I can tell you I could have waited another day to see Batman Superman, and I think I would have been just fine. But that niche experience they were trying to sell me, they got me. So what can I say?
So before we talk about all the things that theaters are doing to try to get basically asses in the seats, let's go back to a simpler time and take advantage of that impeccable memory of yours.
Aha.
You mentioned going to the movies as a child. Do you remember the first movie that you saw in the theaters?
Yes, it was E.T. Back in 1982. Now, I was only 3 years old, and the film had been in theaters for weeks at that time. And so we're talking about June of 1982. I am just over 3. So when I say my memory is impeccable, only because when you're 3 years old and you're in a theater that the size of this one is, we're talking about 1,000 capacity theater, it seems like such a gigantic big deal. And I do remember it. I remember everything about it. It was an event. It was like going to see a presidential inauguration. I hope that makes sense, because it seemed like such a big deal at the time. The next movie that I saw in the theater was the following May. Return of the Jedi was released on, I think it was May 19th of 1983. I could be wrong by a day or so on that, but I have pictures of that night. It was at a specific cinema in town, not the main one. There was a balloon show going on nearby the theater, as well as the events surrounding the theater, everyone trying to get in. I remember that so well because I felt like I was a part of something important. And then, of course, the movie was fantastic, and it, served all of my childhood entertainment needs wonderfully. So those were the foundations right there. I mean, I was hooked. E.T. would have been one thing to overwhelm me almost with all of the stimuli. But once Return of the Jedi hit, I was just barely 4 years old, and that was it right there. You got me hooked for life. I don't know, comparatively speaking, if a child turning 4 going to see, I don't know if their parents would take them to see Captain America Civil War, but that's the comparison, I suppose. If a parent would go to take their child to see that now, if they would come away with the same sense of awe that I had.
Nowadays, or at least the movie-going experience doesn't seem as sacred, as precious. You would imagine even before our time, before even our parents' time, where people are getting dressed up in a suit to go see a movie. Those days are long gone. Now it's a very casual affair with recliners and commercials. It's a completely different experience than when we saw movies, let alone when movie theaters were first spreading out throughout the country, let alone throughout the world. So I would say that you take a 4-year-old now, between TV and cable and the streaming services and everything, they're watching a movie on the way to the theater in the DVD player that's on the back of, their mom's seat to go see the Jungle Book at the theater. So that preciousness, that memory maybe isn't there, just like you remember E.T.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that. And it makes me feel bad for the youth of today to not be able to have that kind of experience.
You remember your first movie/movies, what about fondest movie-going experience?
Well, that's part of it. I would say Return of the Jedi is still the pinnacle because of the cultural phenomena surrounding it, including all of those action figures, and you know what I'm talking about there. The following year, when Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom was released, for whatever reason, I think it's because my parents saddled up my younger brother with a babysitter that night and specifically took me and said, "This is for you." They had just recently shown me Raiders of the Lost Ark, and it was a big deal for them to specifically take just me. I have a lot of fond memories of that, also because I was scared out of my gourd seeing that movie for the first time, with the people ripping hearts out of chests and the poison you just drank, Dr. Jones, and all of the tomfoolery with that movie and voodoo dolls and stuff. That was a pretty precious thing because I kind of felt like I'd grown up just a teeny bit at that point. That was a pretty fantastic one. I'll also point to the first rated R film that I saw in the theater, 1989's Leviathan.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. That was a big deal because my parents had allowed me to see Alien and Aliens at age 8. And so their thinking was, ooh, this is another monster movie. Josh can handle it. My mom took just me to the theater to see Leviathan. They thought that I could handle it. And I gripped the seat the entire time. I laugh at myself now, looking back at a 10-year-old gripping the seat to a pretty awful movie. But I would say that resonates with me as well. The first film that I took a date to, which would be 1992's Hero with Gina Davis and Dustin Hoffman, I think, and Andy Garcia as well. Those fumbling moments where I know that the date that I was with was waiting for me to hold a hand or smack a kiss, or at some point. That movie, whilst very mediocre, the tension was amped the entire time because of the pending affection that I was doomed to dole out. I would say the release of Star Wars into the theater was another big deal in 1997. All of a sudden, I think I understood that what I felt was important for a good portion of my life actually was culturally important. I could see once again what this meant to people and what it meant to me. And I had brethren at the theater, which was nice. After that, of course, there are a number of other experiences since then because I've had so many more as an adult at the theater. But those in particular stand out as not just movie-going experiences, but life-altering days.
Josh and I will continue our conversation in a second. In the meantime, if you are listening on iTunes, please take a moment to rate and review. Just search for the Fan2Fan podcast, go under reviews, enter a star rating, or write a review if you have a second or two, and click send. That's how easy it is. I will greatly appreciate it. Thanks. I think it's so easy to dismiss a movie as being capable of providing sense memory, but it's not. Just because we collect the movies either on a shelf or on our phone or in a cloud, just because we can watch them off the back of a seat from a portable DVD player in a minivan, or we can watch them in the waiting room, waiting for our doctor's appointment on our phone. It's so easy to dismiss the fact that for many people, regardless of age, it's very easy to remember a movie because of something, like you said, because of a first date, a moment with parents, or just a moment in general where there was a sense of awareness, where you knew that you were, grown up, that you were doing what other grown-ups were doing by being in this theater and sharing. And I think that's part of it too. And that's maybe some of the spreading of that connective tissue, where before you could go see a movie and you could have that in common, and you remembered, you saw Star Wars in its re-release, you saw Jurassic Park, you saw something like Titanic, but to be able to say to people at the water cooler, wherever you are, that you saw the movie and immediately you're speaking the same language.
You're right. That shared experience, I think, is something that I honestly don't think that it exists anymore, or at least if it does, it's on a lower scale. There's no more water cooler discussions about what's in the theater right now, and I don't think there has been for a while. And maybe that's unfair, perhaps. But
You mean because of the decreasing number of water coolers?
You may be on to something there, sir, but what I meant to get at, of course, is that the variety of options that we have now has depreciourized, that's a horrible term. It has it has desensitized us to going to the theater. Okay, it's not as big of a deal, I think, to people anymore.
No, and it's collapsed too. The idea that, like you mentioned, Jurassic Park came out in June of 93. I remember I was in high school and there was a field trip around August when school began to go see it together with my chemistry class. But they'd almost rebooted their marketing campaign for Christmas because the theater was still going strong from June all the way to December. And that's you don't see that anymore. Now you have a movie in theaters for 4 to 6 weeks. Maybe a popular title like a Batman, Superman, or Jungle Book might go 10 weeks. And instead of waiting that 3-month, 90-day delay that might encourage people to go to the theater, studios are jumping right into that home video market so that they can take advantage of the DVD and Blu-ray sales, let alone the digital sales as well.
I know that you, being a marketer, will be able to tell me more about what I'm saying, which is good. You'll put words to what I'm trying to say, which is always a good idea, by the way. Please do that always. But keeping it fresh in your mind, that presence, the ability to keep Batman, Superman in the theater on opening weekend, and then the following Monday, you can go to Amazon and pre-order your Blu-ray. That is a seamless thing it's relatively new compared to the last 20 years of our culture. You couldn't pre-order Jurassic Park the following Monday, that it came out. Maybe they should have done that then. They could have forecast better what their numbers would have been for VHS sales, but what that does is I think there's so much money being spent on these things now. I think you have to maximize that by keeping it fresh in people's heads, making sure that once you're done with the theater, make sure that you go out and you buy a toy. Make sure that you preserve your DVD, because if you don't have it, then you're not going to get it when it comes out. You better pre-order it, even though there's going to be hundreds of copies available. Oh, and in fact, make sure that you get your digital version early, because you'll be able to watch it on your mobile devices or whatever a few days before people actually get it in their hands. That presence, that constant needing to stay in your mind, I think that is a relatively new marketing strategy comparative to the past 100 years of cinema.
The iron will always be hot. What is different now is that the iron is hot for a shorter amount of time, and there are a shit ton of other irons.
Yes.
So if you're a studio, you have to take advantage and jump in there. I remember 2014, Jeffrey Katzenberg had forecasted that the window, a 3-week theatrical window, wasn't far off, just so they can make money off DVD and Blu-ray sales. The Batman and Superman release, they were already promoting on the day before the movie came out on Amazon that you could pre-order the DVD and the Blu-ray. And of course, they had their steel case, they had their special features, 3D, and then they included other peripherals like graphic novels and statues. Not uncommon now to see that, let alone all the different outlets where you could get different edition at Walmart versus Target versus Best Buy versus online realtors. Yes. They have to do that just to entice people. And exactly like you mentioned, keep it in the person's mind, keep it in the foreground of their mind at least long enough to get the person to part with some of their digital money.
I got to be honest with you, man. It's almost overkill. There was something, I'm going to sound like the crotchety lawn guy, but there was something neat to me about knowing that if I went to the video store and picked up the little leaflet that they had saying what was coming out in the following month, I could say, oh yeah, it's been 5-6 months since the release of this in the theater. It's about time that it comes on video. That's great. Then I can see it, and maybe at some point I get to own it. There was something anticipatory about that, akin to going into the theater. Now it kind of seems like it's too much too soon. I'm bombarded with it. I don't necessarily want to be bombarded with it, but I know that makes me sound old and gray and crotchety.
No, it's a conversation that studio execs have been having for a while. I mean, if anything, if we feel like the movie-going experience might be less of an event, they have felt that for a while. When you have Netflix releasing their first original movie in Beast of No Nation directly to their streaming service and to theaters simultaneously. And it did receive it received critical acclaim. So you would think they might be able to do a strict theatrical release and it might have some legs, maybe not necessarily the box office that another movie of its type would, released through the traditional studio system. But nonetheless, if Netflix, who is now a feature film producer / I guess distributor at that point, is distributing their movie in that fashion, they're basically telling you it's okay to sit at home on Friday and have a date night on your couch, just like it's okay to go to the theater and watch this movie.
Yeah, that's what they're saying, and I'm not going to say that they're wrong.
I feel like you disagree, though.
I do disagree. Of course. Was it my hesitance that you could tell? There is something about it. Maybe it's the look of the theater. Maybe it's the smells. Well, it certainly has to do with some of the smells. Popcorn, people conglomerating in the same area. Maybe I enjoy the sour stickiness of theater floors. Maybe I enjoy getting kicked in the back of the head a number of times by a small child whose parents don't want to corral them. There is just something earnest about going to the theater that I feel like I'm going to experience it at its full level there. Not just because it's theater quality sound, big booming noises, not just because it's a large screen, but because it's communal. It's a cultural experience. And can I really have the same cultural experience from my couch? I suppose that's debatable, but I disagree.
Why are people still going to the theater?
It's analogous to why are you going to a concert? You could sit in your home and listen to any number of live concerts, full on CD or digital download of your favorite band, but you still choose to go touring with them or choose to see them when they come nearby or attend a festival, what have you. Why? Because live music is pretty fantastic. So I don't think that there's a substitute for that, and I don't think there ever will be, at least for me. Maybe we're part of the last, or at least one of the last generations that truly finds value in being a part of something. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I feel that description just set up Ken Burns' next documentary, The Last Generation of Moviegoers.
Call us up, Ken.
The rise and fall of the movie-going experience as he interviews old-timers like you and I and reminisce to our times where we would have to run out of the theater ever so quickly to use the bathroom just to run back and try not to miss a key pivotal scene.
Yeah, I don't know. I suppose there's just something fantastic about the whole thing, despite all of the various troubles over the years that I've actually had, especially going there more now at a rate far exceeding anything that I did when I was younger. That means that there's more opportunity for bad things, I suppose, or negative experiences.
Theaters have had to counter not only the streaming services, cable, and bad experiences by adding things to try to attract folks to come. So it's different from being on their couch. And since, like you mentioned, you see movies at a much more frequent click than I have, but things like 3D, IMAX, I mean, just about all these different things, 4DX. What's the last 3D movie that you saw?
The Force Awakens in 3D was the last one. And I wanted to see it in all of the formats because of the variance, of course, with what your experience could be. With that being a film that was already going to be near and dear to my heart most likely. I wanted to see it in various forms, and IMAX with big booming noises, and it was IMAX 3D for that matter, so both at the same time. And was anything going to pop out at me? Is it going to be Avatar-esque in terms of its pop-out quality, but it's going to be Star Wars instead, therefore it's much cooler. So of course I wanted to see that. IMAX is, I'll speak to all of these formats separately because I think it's important to make a distinction in what the theater's trying to do. IMAX specifically, you just have to be prepared for it. Right? I mean, it's a gigantic theater. Your eyes are going to be stretched to their limits. Your ears are going to be stretched to their limits because it is just that much louder and more immersive. You're going to walk out of there pulverized. And if you aren't, then what are you doing there? I mean, I like that, though. I remember seeing Interstellar in November of 2014, sat in the front row by choice. I wanted that screen to envelop my senses, and I did. I mean, I walked out of there exhausted, and some people might say, no, I don't want to do that, but I couldn't help it. I really wanted to have that immersive experience. I think that's a niche. Because you need to know what you're getting into when you go into IMAX. It's a visual and auditory overload.
No home theater is going to be able to replicate the size and, like you mentioned, the level of immersiveness, to create words on the spot here, that an IMAX screen or a dome is going to provide. There's no way. In as a high quality of a surround system as you may have, it's not going to replicate the IMAX experience.
No, it's not. And that's something that you also pay for. I think the average IMAX ticket is around $15. So you're going $5 to more dollars more than what you would normally spend. But pick and choose your movies. I think if you're looking for something that is science fiction based, IMAX is something that works really well because those big images and the star fields, et cetera, are important to see that wide and grand. But if you're looking to see a movie like Avengers in IMAX or even Star Wars, I say that knowing full well what this is going to mean, it was too much. The action was so frantic, and frankly, it was kind of hard to follow. And I'm somebody that's paying very close attention to it. Action movies, it's hard enough to follow on such a big screen. When you get it to that exponential screen, all of a sudden it becomes overwhelming to the point of ad nauseum. As for 3D, we of course know that there's the difference between filming in native 3D and then post-conversion 3D. If you see a film like Avatar in 2009 that was filmed in a native 3D and that everything that they filmed was meant to be three-dimensional like that, to be immersive, to be something that you could stick your hand in the screen and feel like you're a part of it. Whereas the post-conversion stuff like they do to every Marvel film or whatever,
or G.I. Joe Retaliation, Hercules, yes, compared to, like you said, like Avatar or Gravity that were filmed with the 3D format in mind.
Yes, and that is something that you just don't need to waste your time on because there's nothing there. That depth of image does not radiate back at you. 3D as a whole in the theater, I'd say just make sure that you pick and choose, right? But everybody's doing it because those extra dollars on there matter to the studio.
G.I. Joe Retaliation with the post 3D conversion, it's not going to help itself at all. Yes. It's not going to put more butts in the seats versus something like Gravity that becomes an experience and a 3D adds to that experience.
Yeah, it's an event as opposed to just a film. It's something you want to go see at the theater because of the way that it is at the theater. And it's something that both Gravity and Interstellar I haven't been able to replicate by any means at home, despite how much I might want to turn up that system.
So you mentioned Interstellar, and this got me thinking about the subscription memberships, because when Interstellar came out, IMAX promoted it with the unlimited ticket, and I think it was between like $20 or $25, and you could see the movie repeatedly. So you had unlimited viewings. I wonder if that's going to become a thing that movie theater franchises do in order to at least secure. I guess it would be no different than Netflix is charging you the $8.99, $9.99 a month for essentially unlimited viewing of their catalog. If a theater could do that for theater goers, I mean, in your case, you would probably do that hands down. You would probably pay $19.99, or maybe even, what if I stretched it? Would you pay $29.99 for unlimited viewings of movies for one calendar month?
It's very interesting that you should say that, because our show has looked into that in various forums, and in fact, I'm surprised I haven't done it already. There are various services out there that cater to our local theater chains as well as other theater chains, and you pay a certain amount and you can see so many films each week or whatnot, or unlimited, like so many a day, until you exhaust that. And it's one person, it's not like you can take your family for this fee, of course. But for me, yeah, it would absolutely work out if I felt like I would use it every week and it would be worthy of doing that. It's really hard to forecast. Yes, I will be seeing 6 movies this month. That is a heck of an idea for people that are movie lovers, or know that they have a bunch of stuff that they're going to see in the theater during the summer. And so maybe in June or July, they sell a whole bunch of those. It's a wonderful idea. I just don't know if it gains popularity, then they're just going to start jacking those prices up to meet what they feel they've been taken advantage of. Does that make sense?
With the Interstellar unlimited viewing, that was regional. So the cost for a ticket in Cleveland was different than the cost for an unlimited viewing ticket in New York or LA. So if you had a theater chain that was conscientious of release schedules and knew that in the summer you will have more tentpole blockbuster type movies that folks will want to see, so maybe you're selling an annual unlimited viewing package. So the person that's willing to pay a premium for that at a discounted rate, you're getting the entire thing. But a January unlimited pass is not the same price as a July unlimited viewing pass.
Yes.
And those are even on a sliding scale, that the unlimited pass for July in Cleveland is a different price point than the one in Chicago. Or
yeah, you've got a point there. It reminds me, last November, MGM, Fox, or whoever was distributing Spectre, where they were selling these cards. They were black cards, and for $100, mind you, you could have this collector's card. Only a few hundred or small thousands of them were made, and you could see Spectre as many times as you wanted to if you had this card. And that was $100. So you're paying for the novelty of a collector's item. You're also paying for the ability to see a pretty mediocre to bad movie, as many times as you wanted to. So they're trying things like that too. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, they're still going to try and make their money back. It might sound like a good deal, but I've been hesitant to, not just because of what's been in theaters, but also because I feel like they're getting me somehow. It leads to an additional discussion about their rewards systems that they have now too, but we can get into that at another time.
Well, even beyond attempted subscription memberships or what might happen in the future, as in trying to get your money, food. I mean, that's evolved. I mean, now they've turned into essentially restaurants. Gone are the days of popcorn and at best hot dogs and nachos. And now you're getting full bar service, top shelf alcohol and craft beers. You're not going to dinner and a movie. You're going to dinner at the movies.
Yes, trying to combine those two things. And that's a wonderful idea. I think your discussion of food at the theater does matter. People asked for bigger variety because the theater said, hey, stop bringing your own stuff in. We'll provide it for you. I know that it costs a lot, but we've got all this variety. So they have. There's popcorn that you can put all sorts of flavors on. There's, candy. There's frozen goods. There's kids' snack treats and snack packs, et cetera, et cetera. And you can... There's so many customizable options with your drinks, et cetera. And so they've got the variety there, but it really does cost just a gargantuan amount of money to do that. So
it's a shit ton. That's a metric unit. It's a shit ton.
Yeah, indeed. I was going to go one further, but I like yours. It meets in the middle.
And it's an actual metric unit, I feel. At least in the UK, maybe. Who knows?
For sure.
Josh and I will conclude our conversation in a second, but remember, you can find the Fan2Fan podcast at www.fanpodcast.com. Facebook, just search Fan2Fan podcast. That's FAN, the number 2, FAN, or on Twitter at Fan2Fan podcast. I'd love to hear from you, so reach out, send the message, and let me know what you think of the show. Thanks.
And now, on with the show.
Food, the subscription services, I mean, the theaters have had to do that. And when you think about the recliners, and
if you think back to when we were children, we had theater seats that were rickety. They made a whole bunch of noise if you got up. They were uncomfortable. They had bad springs. They smelled, the whole 9 yards. It was a negative thing. They ripped all these things out and created stadium seating, that special term that is supposed to indicate that all of your fears are taken care of at the theater, right? So they have cup holders. They recline the arms. They recline back. They're more comfortable. And in essence, that's great. That's fine. But does it really make your theater experience better now than it was when you were a kid because they changed the chair arrangement?
Yeah, it's become where stadium seating is just about standard. And then you have things like 4DX where the seats now bounce and there's pulses and shifts. I mean, you think of William Castle and, his days of shock sections. That's for a movie he had, I Saw What You Did in '65, where they had seat belts in certain seats for audience members, and they would do just different gags and different things to try to get people to go to the theater. Mm-hmm. Now you have things like 4DX where I believe it was for Avengers 2, Robert Downey Jr. comes to the screen and you can smell Tony Stark's cologne. The odors match the on-screen action. You have these, odor blasters that are just flanking the audience, but not just with that, with burst of light, with smoke, and you're paying for that experience, that immersiveness again. It's just like, okay, well, I don't have that at home. We definitely didn't have that as kids. Is it worth the ticket price of $25 or over?
To be fair, I have not been to a show that has been 4DX, but boy, it sounds like fun if you don't want to pay attention to your movie. If you're interested in just kind of going there like a roller coaster or, a ride at Universal Studios, which I have experienced that kind of thing, then great. It's a neat gimmick to think of, but I think it's more of a niche thing. It shouldn't be a standard. If it gets people to the theaters, then I would say that's a pretty impressive feat, because it doesn't seem to be all of that cool if you do it more than one time. Does that make sense? Like if you do it one time, hey, that was cool, but I'm not going to do that every week.
No, and it has to be for the right movie. You go to a museum, you go to an amusement park like Six Flags, and they may have a small IMAX type theater. And so this is an interesting transition. So J.J. Abrams is doing this thing now using a multi-screen ultra-wide format. And he's using it for 20 or 30 minutes of footage for Star Trek Beyond. So similar to the way Nolan used IMAX for pieces of Interstellar, let alone, if I remember right, was it Dark Knight or Dark Knight Rises?
Dark Knight Rises, yes.
Okay, about 20 or 30 minutes of IMAX footage in there. J.J. Abrams is using this new technology for Beyond, so that it started because there was it's called like barge raft ride or something, and it's a 270-degree field of vision. So if you're looking straight ahead at the screen, your peripheral vision is also surrounded by these two massive screens.
Okay.
And in this barge ride, the idea is that you're in the perspective, the POV of someone on a barge going down a waterfall. So if you're looking straight ahead, you're fine. But this 12, 15-minute short movie that was shown in a number of IMAX films that were created with this 270-degree view in mind, you're watching, you're experiencing all of this. So then you take that idea and you extrapolate it to the deck of the Enterprise. so that if you're watching a scene and you're watching Chris Pine sitting in the captain's seat, maybe looking straight ahead at the massive view screen, and all around you, you feel like you're on the deck of the Enterprise. It's little things like that you just think, is it a gimmick? It's obviously not going to work for indie drama, but will movies like Star Trek Beyond or the next Avengers film have to do that to make it special, to make it more enticing to get people to go to the theater?
That's not a bad idea. If you think about the Matrix and the bullet time idea, it's something that caught on, and people may have, I think people may have gone to the theater to see something like that. It was innovative and cool, and they took a shot at something new, and it actually worked amazingly. I wouldn't doubt that this works really well, is something that you can add to a big event or tentpole film like Star Trek Beyond and make it last like that. To me, that sounds kind of neat as an immersive thing, especially Star Trek Beyond is going to be an IMAX film. So if there are portions of that film like that with the curvature of the camera like that, I can see getting pretty interested in that part of the film and not necessarily distracted. If anything, Abrams' lens flares would distract me, not that.
Well, so there's only a few movie theaters that are going to be equipped for this, but by virtue of limitations on the technology side, J.J. Abrams won't have the ability for his produced Star Trek Beyond to be seen everywhere. But it made me think something that'll hit closer home to you is when Lucas demanded that theaters upgrade their projection systems when he released The Phantom Menace. So you had all these screens in the U.S. that had to go to a digital projection system if they wanted to show and make money off The Phantom Menace.
I do remember hearing that there was something about that, and to be fair, it's not a bad idea. He was saying, I'm making a piece of technology. I would like you to show it, but I also need you to do this so that this piece of technology can be shown. I don't think it was too much necessarily to ask for. Having that kind of versatility in a theater, I don't think is too much to ask for a theater as well. Not knowing the ins and outs of switching out projectors between film and digital and the wherewithal of getting from point A to point B, I can't tell you that it's a perfect idea, but to me, it sounds like if you make something that's innovative, that gets people excited, and is going to make a lot of money, then it shouldn't be too much for the theater to do their part.
Yeah, I think only Lucas could have gotten away with that. I mean, recently you had Quentin Tarantino with The Hateful Eight, how he released it. Yeah, 70 millimeter. I mean, it's a cinephile's wet dream. If you think about movies, Technicolor movies of the 50s and 60s being released in that 70 millimeter format, but so many theaters.
Bernie, it was delightful. Did you get a chance to see it in 70 millimeter?
I did not.
Yes,
so please,
we came up to Evanston, to the Cinemark in Evanston, and watched the road show, and there was an intermission and all of the wonderful things that you could have possibly imagined. Not only was the sound just absolutely impeccable, I think that having the best score of the year helped, but the sound was impeccable. The film itself was broad in scope, and the wide. I mean, it's shown in widescreen, of course, anyways, but there's something about the 70 millimeter that added a scope to it that I can't possibly explain, especially the first half hour, 45 minutes of the film when there's a lot of snowscapes, etc. It reminded me of seeing a movie when I was a kid. It really did. There's something about actual film that does something for me. I wish more filmmakers would do that.
Maybe that's even better than using cologne or smoke burst, is just having an Ennio Morricone soundtrack. If you have an Ennio Morricone soundtrack, then your movie will be better by virtue of his participation in your film.
Precisely, and that lends more to an artistic experience as opposed to a gimmick circus experience like 4XD. Nothing against anyone that's trying to bring that technology to the table, but I certainly prefer an artist's expression over gimmicks.
Yeah, and you need filmmakers like Lucas to push technology forward. He saw that digital projection was inevitable, so using Phantom Menace as a platform, as a means to get theaters to upgrade to what is now the standard. Again, only Lucas could have done that. Interstellar, Nolan released it in 70 millimeter in a few theaters. I think it was only about a dozen theaters, but compared to The Hateful Eight, that was released for many more screens on 70 millimeter. But there were theaters that had to spend between 60 and 80,000 just to have the capability to show The Hateful Eight in 70 millimeter. So it's almost like going backwards to go forward, to service a filmmaker, to service a piece of nostalgia, to service a format for one specific movie. I don't know that we're going to see a run on 70 millimeter releases in the next few years. I mean, I don't see Adam Sandler releasing his next film in 70 millimeter format. You just wonder what the future of the film going experience will be between the food, the experiential, immersive. Are we going to see less theaters? Is there going to be essentially like a monopoly in theater chains where we'll have, maybe 2, 3 at the most in the U.S.? And
I kind of feel like there already is, to be honest. Even the smaller ones are, so and so presents this theater, or the art house theaters. Well, there's Cine Arts attached to Cinemark, where you kind of have to even have the big corporations say, here, for you folks that like these artsy things that don't make us any money, we're giving you this theater at the back of the house where you can see something maybe twice over the weekend. Going forward, if they're going to do anything different, I would look to, and by no means am I an expert on this, it's just a pure speculative opinion on my part. I think that the inclusion of virtual technology, virtual realities, might become something that is important. Instead of wearing just 3D glasses, you are putting on the film on your face. You might have to go to the theater in order to experience this, where they can still play the sound or whatever, but at least that way you are literally, it's right in your face. You're a part of it, not just a 3D projection. I think that to get people to the theaters from this ever expanding home-based platform, you do have to do special things. I don't know exactly what else other than virtual technology is coming our way, but I do think that's at least a start. It would help to have better movies too. I don't know what you think about that, but
what's the baseball phrase? Winning solves everything.
Yeah.
But if you have a good movie, it will get people to theaters. There was a recent article I read with Adam Aron, who's the new head of AMC Entertainment. I don't know if you read this article, but he talked about allowing texting in theaters. The quote was, when you tell a 22-year-old to turn off their phone and not ruin the movie, they hear, please cut off your left arm above the elbow. You can't tell a 22-year-old to turn off their cell phone. That's not how they live their life. You wonder if the chains are going to then openly make accommodations and, almost go back on movie-going courtesy and almost unspoken protocol.
Well, if that is the case, then they've lost a theater goer in me, at least. I'll make that bold statement. I'm not interested in catering to somebody's rudeness, because that's just all that it is. And that guy's statement, whilst maybe forward thinking, I should say, it still means that they've given up on certain common courtesies. Talking, or are they going to say, well, it's okay to talk too? Of course they wouldn't. Texting is the logical next step from talking in terms of the rudeness scale. So I would say that they've lost me if that's the way that they want to go, just to cater to somebody that says, I have to have this. No, you don't. That's the thing. Stop allowing that to happen. This is my get off the lawn moment, and I'm fine with it. It's a church for me, or at least the sacredness of a church applies to the theater for me, just like it would apply to a sports stadium. It's a cathedral in that way, not in that it's religious, but in that there's a specific routine there. And I don't think it's necessary to cater to people that want to upset that cathedral-like moment for me. But I know that sounds rough.
No, I'd say you made my point for me because the whole time I was just saying, Josh, you're romantic.
Yeah. Isn't it something to sit still and give yourself to something, to a work of art for 2 hours? What's wrong with that? I get upset when people say, gosh, I can't sit there in the theater for 3 hours and watch a movie. I say, what? But what's wrong with you? Why not? Why can't you do that? I mean, if the art takes 3 hours to tell, then let it take 3 hours to tell. Now, let's not tell Peter Jackson that, and he'll just keep, making these 3 hour things. But I think you understand where I'm getting at.
Oh, absolutely. We're kindred spirits in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
But it's less precious for people if they're seeing the movie from the back of the seat on their phone. Who knows? It might be very Norman Rockwellian, where someone is watching a different movie on their cell phone in the theater than the one that's on the screen. And it could just be that.
Yeah, that's definitely a commentary on our times, being able to absorb two types of information at once, two types of art forms at once, and that's supposed to be maybe okay. I would say that there's just a specific type of behavior that says if you are okay with not being courteous to your fellow human being, regardless of if you have to be on your phone, then fine. If you have to access it, then A, you shouldn't be there, or B, yes, you can step away from it, because you're supposed to be cognizant in all situations of your fellow human being. Most of the human beings that go to see a movie, they would like some silence. They would like to be able to pay attention and experience the art that's being thrown their way. Or, when I say art, sometimes it's loose when I say that, but I think that's just a basic common courtesy thing, and it's not indicative of this generation versus that generation. So the gentleman that's in charge of AMC theaters, I would say you've kept me away from AMC if you're going to do that. I just think that that's sad.
Here's hoping that never comes to pass. Let's say, or at least it doesn't become official policy. I really don't want to see a commercial from AMC letting me know. They'll have a Charlize Theron or a George Clooney saying, "Oh, hey, I was just texting a friend of mine." You're probably texting a friend too, and that's okay. We at AMC theaters, we understand. So go ahead, but just be courteous of the people around you. Tell your friend how much you like the movie, or how much you like the popcorn or the food that we have, and we have a lot of options. But let me not get into that. So from George Clooney to you. Text responsibly. Thanks. We'll see you at the movies.
Yeah, because we've given up.
You're still romantic.
Yes.
That's it for this episode. Tune in next time for more fan-to-fan conversations on the Fan2Fan podcast. Thanks for listening.
They can't stay here.
Yes, they can, Dad.
But they're contaminated. It's too late for them, but not us.